Good morning. Would members of the committee please find their seats? Meeting of the October Transit and Bus Committee is called to order. Mr. Marino, are there any members of the public who have registered and are present to speak?
Mr. Chairman, we have approximately a dozen speakers this morning. I would like to remind all the speakers you each have 2 minutes to speak. When I call your name, please come to the podium. The first speaker is Omar Vera.
All right, how do you do it? Oh, all right, testing. Good morning, Transit Committee. Welcome back to October edition of your meeting. Okay, first of all, I'd like to mention that on Election Day, November 7th, will be the 1-year anniversary of the return of the sorely missed W train. Andrew and I worked really hard to bring it back. Thank you again. And, okay. Now, speaking of which, today, the Astoria line, 2 of the stations on the Astoria line closed for renovations, which is desperately needed because the Astoria line looks like the stations look like they're crumbling. They need to be up to date. But I'd like to also mention from last year to extend the Astoria line to LaGuardia Airport because the governor's air train, like I say, it's going to go nowhere. And it's only going to add overcrowding to the 7 line, which is already having like overcrowding issues as is the most used line in Queens, or one of the most used lines. Yes, so we should move with that. And of course, you had to keep answering the, regarding the issues on the train delays and the graffiti. You gotta work on that because we need to be moving forward, not back to the 70s and 80s. I already mentioned the story last month about what happened with me during one morning commute back in March. All right, and with that, have a good day, and see you around.
Thank you, Mr. Vera. The next speaker is Murray Bowden.
Morning. My wife and I got back at 10 o'clock last night from 2 weeks in Berlin and Paris. We were with Rhodes Scholar on a tour. We extensively rode the subways, buses, trams, commuter rail in both cities. The question to the board is, how many members of this committee have been to Europe in the last 2 years? Have you seen the advances that they have in their systems? In particular, we rode the M1 extensively. I won't describe it here. If you'd like to know, I'll tell you in private. It was excellent. Tourists are the lifeblood of both Berlin and Paris. It drives their economy enormously. People want to come to New York for the same reason. Tourism will be a driver of the economy of New York. You need to see the variety and this moving forward that they're doing in Europe. New trains that you've purchased where they're open cars are enormously valuable. To see from one end to the other, that goes right into my hearing aid. I recommend that if you haven't been to see what other people are doing in the area of transportation, that you do it. New York City, the transportation under Tom and Carmine made enormous steps forward in moving forward. You're not getting the credit you deserve for moving forward. The bad press that's out there is of things that are in the past, but not what's happening now. And I think I want to congratulate you on moving forward in a way that hasn't been done in other agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. The next speaker is Liz Patrick. Ms. Patrick will be followed by Jasmine Rivera.
Hello, I'm Liz Patrick with the East 72nd Street Neighborhood Association. I'd like to start by thanking Stephanie Bogard, head of the road bus operations, for her responsiveness to our concerns about the field conditions that are leading to overcrowding as well as schedule delays for the M72, 66, and 31. Today I'm here to ask for help with two specific bottlenecks that are greatly impacting the crosstown routes on the Upper East Side. The first is York Avenue between 73rd and 61st Street. In this 12-block stretch, there are 3 entrances to the FDR and 2 exits. In addition, there's currently a construction site on the west side of York Avenue between 61st and 63rd, which narrows the straight-ahead traffic to just 1 lane. The gridlock that's been created at the PM rush with cars backing up on York Avenue has caused the M72 and the M66 to have to wait for 3 to 4 light cycles before it can even make a right turn onto York, go 1 block, and then start heading west. You can imagine how long it takes for the M31 to move along this stretch. The second road condition is unique to the M66. Park East, a small school on 68th Street between Lex and 3rd, loads 3 large yellow buses every day between 4 and 4:15 right in the middle of the road. As a result, the M66 can't move. We're asking DOT's help to explore possible improvements to traffic flow on York Avenue. The bus dispatchers there believe that changing the timing of the traffic lights, in addition to adding more NYPD traffic agents, might help keep the intersection clear and the bus moving. In the case of Park East, we really need curbside loading for the school. Without improvements to the traffic congestion, I'm afraid, Mr. Cafiro, we're going to have to build in these delays to the future schedule. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patrick. The next speaker is Jasmine Rivera. Is Ms. Rivera present? The following speaker is Bishop Earl McKay.
Good morning. My name is Earl McKay. I'm pastor of the Church of God of Prophecy in the Concourse neighborhood of the Bronx. I serve as bishop of the New York area district of my denomination. We have 550 congregants and are united as a church in our work against health disparities. For this reason, I live in the Bronx for 29 years. And I've seen the community in good times and in bad times, and alcohol often plays a role in the bad times, especially among our young people. There are stories of alcohol-induced altercations in the community as well as in schools. We also know from the Department of Health statistics that underage drinking leads to over 7,000 ER visits a year. This places a great financial burden on the public and private hospital of our city. Furthermore, we know that alcohol advertising disproportionately targets communities of color. That has been found to be especially true in my community in the Bronx. A research group led by Dr. Cian Lucas rode all 7 subway lines in the Bronx and assessed all the ads in all 68 stations. They found that alcohol ads were more likely to be placed in stations in the neighborhood with more children and more people of color and higher rate of poverty. Policy brief featuring the summary of this study was mailed to the board recently. Considering this targeting is unacceptable for the MTA to continue to allow alcohol advertising in the system. In closing, by noting that the Judeo-Christian tradition places great emphasis on value of our children and the importance of protecting them. Specifically, the Christian gospel warns against causing children to stumble. I offer that these alcohol advertisements do just that, and I urge you to consider this as you make your decision and determination whether to allow these alcohol ads to continue. Thank you for your attention and your careful consideration.
Thank you, Bishop McKay. The next speaker is Stacy Carpenter. Ms. Carpenter will be followed by Bill Henderson.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Stacy Carpenter. Thank you. And I'm from the Building Alcohol Ad-Free Transit campaign. We're aware of only one argument being made against our proposal to eliminate alcohol ads. The concern was that this could be a slippery slope towards eliminating all sorts of ads from the subways. We've heard this argument before, since it's a favorite talking point of the advertising and alcohol industries. And I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about why the slippery slope is not a strong argument. First of all, tobacco ads were banned from the MTA in the mid-90s, and it did not lead to other bans in over 20 years. So there was already an opportunity for a slippery slope to occur, and it has not. Second, other city transit systems that banned alcohol ads did not experience a slippery slope either. 32 transit systems have eliminated alcohol ads in the U.S., but our research shows that no other transit systems in the country have banned ads from other products besides alcohol and tobacco. And lastly, let us remember that alcohol is so problematic for young people that it is illegal for them to purchase. This sets it above nearly all other advertising concerns except for tobacco and firearms. Finally, I'd like to present you with a petition. Over 1,000 people have signed this from across New York State and a few from New Jersey and other states as well, calling for an end to alcohol ads on New York City's transit. The public has spoken. This is an easy issue for the board to solve, and we urge you to listen to public health experts and community leaders who stand behind this. Is there someone I can present this to? I have another copy that's not laying on your floor, if you'd like. That's clean. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. The next speaker is Bill Henderson.
We always wait for the train to get out of the way before we move through safely. I'm Bill Henderson, Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee of the MTA. I'm speaking on behalf of the Transit Riders Council. Previously, we've not been involved deeply in accessoride issues due to paratransit not being included in our original mandate and the structure of the program. However, as riders representatives, we feel compelled to speak about the newly published Accessoride Bill of Rights. We think a customer bill of rights is an excellent idea, and it's a fulfillment of the promises made to accessoride users. The promise grew out of some legitimate concerns. We agree with the idea of a bill of rights, but we have problems with the current execution. The document that's been developed is certainly not user-friendly, and as far as we're aware, was not created with substantial specific input from accessoride users. The result, to use an analogy to our nation's Constitution, is as if someone scattered chunks of the U.S. Code into the first 10 amendments to our Constitution. We think that our paratransit program can do better. One of our major concerns is that while a Bill of Rights denotes a general statement of principles that govern relationships between individuals and an organization, the current Accessoride Bill of Rights goes far beyond general principles and delves into issues that would be better contained in a policies and procedures manual, which should also be available to the public. The result is that any general principles governing relationships between accessoride and its users are lost in a sea of language addressing specific situations. The wordiness of the current Bill of Rights makes it a difficult document to present effectively in both the text version and on the MTA website and the formatted version that's online but will also be posted in accessoride vehicles. You can see this is the formatted version. The typeface is fairly small. It's certainly below the 16-point type that is required in the ADA. The contrast between colors is not effective for folks that have visual difficulties. We just think that in a stationary sense, this would be difficult to read. In a moving vehicle, it would be almost impossible to read. We feel like at the very least there should be a reference to where one can get these principles online, or where one can get other information, but it's not there. This was presented to in September to the board in the board cycle, and subsequently was posted on the website without any formal press releases or any other announcements. We think this may be for the best. It gives a chance to take another look at the Bill of Rights and reduce it to something that basically is usable by the riders of Access-a-Ride, and can be a better system for both the users and for the organization as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. The next speaker is Bob Pezzolesi. Mr. Pezzolesi will be followed by Dahlia Goldenberg.
Good morning. My name is Bob Pezzolesi, and I'm with the Building Alcohol Ed Free Transit Campaign and the New York Alcohol Policy Alliance. I want to comment this morning about the public health case for removing alcohol ads from the transit system. There is a strong international consensus in the public health and medical communities about the need to limit alcohol advertising. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the World Health Organization, and the American Academy of Pediatrics have all called for greater limits on alcohol advertising to protect children and youth. In fact, the American Medical Association and the American Public Health Association have specific policy positions calling for the elimination of alcohol advertising from all mass transit systems. Additionally, out of the over 160 organizations in New York City who have endorsed our goal, many have strong public health expertise, including the Public Health Association of New York City, or FANIC, the New York County Academy of Family Physicians, the Ralph Lauren Center for Cancer Care and Prevention, the American Cancer Society Staten Island Region, and Richmond University Medical Center. These organizations support our goal because research is clear that the earlier that young people start to drink, the greater the chance they will suffer from a range of alcohol harms, including alcohol dependence, and engage in other dangerous behaviors later in life, like violent behaviors and suicide attempts. Undoubtedly, one of the factors that drives this problem is alcohol advertising and marketing, with longitudinal public health studies confirming that more alcohol ads a young person sees, the more likely they will start to drink, or drink more if they've already started. Therefore, I urge you to follow the evidence and remove alcohol advertising to protect the health and safety of the young people you serve. Thank you for your time today.
Mr. Pezzolesi. The next speaker is Dahlia Goldenberg. Okay, Ms. Goldenberg is not speaking. The next speaker is Ellen Shannon. Ms. Shannon will be followed by H.P. Scheuer.
Good morning. My name's Ellen Shannon. I'm with the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA. On behalf of the New York City Transit Riders Council, I'm here today to again acknowledge the value of the new dashboard and how well it has been executed and the talent behind it, and it should stand as a model to other transit agencies. One of the metrics that's been put forward on the model is the number of major delay incidents. This metric identifies the number of times when more than 50 trains are delayed due to a single incident. We examined the data from July 2016 through July 2017, before the Subway Action Plan was instituted. What we found was the top 5 lines, the 6, the 4, the 5, the F, and the N, had the largest number of major incidents. Of these, the 6th line came in first place with 90 major incidents, followed by the 4 with 85, the 5 and the F tied for third with 83, and the N with 62. This averages about 6.5 per month. Some lines had as many as 9 and 10 incidents several times during the course of the study period, and the F line topped it out with 12 major incidents in a single month in June. So riders are suffering in the greatest extremes on these 5 lines. The Transit Riders Council will be looking at the action plan to dramatically improve these numbers in the year ahead for the greatest improvements. We would like to draw the board's attention, the state's attention, and the city's attention to these lines as the action plan proceeds and galvanize the funding partners to ensure the plan is financially supported for its greatest success. This city cannot come to a standstill as it has before, and it can't get worse. Without it being, the action plan being supported, it will. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shannon. The next speaker is H.P. Scheuer.
Good morning. My name is H.P. Schroer. I live in Manhattan, and I happen to be a veteran from World War II. When I ride the city subway system and the buses, I get a discount. I get the discount not because I'm a veteran, but because I'm a senior citizen. And what I'm proposing that shouldn't the younger veterans and their spouses, regardless of their age, be given the same discount as older veterans like me? You have the power to do this. Now, there's no legislation required. It simply would be to expand the discount to a new category of people. Photo ID cards are available to veterans in the form of state photo IDs, city IDs, and driver's license. So it's easy to prove to conductors, ticket agents, bus drivers, and others that the bearer is a veteran and entitled to a discount. It's not a question of should we offer this. It's really when we do it. And in that regard, to make it happen, I'd like to volunteer my services to whoever you decide should handle this. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. That was the last speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The minutes from our September Transit and Bus Committee meeting are in the committee book. May I have a motion to approve? Second. Move. Are there any changes? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? The minutes are approved. Mr. Cipriano, are there any changes to the work plan?
There are none, Mr. Chairman.
Then, with your indulgence, before I ask Acting President Mulligan to make his opening statement, I'd like to make one of my own. We'll start off by announcing some organizational changes that have occurred since we last met. Darrell Irick has resumed his position as president of MTA Bus and senior vice president of New York City Transit Department of Buses. Also, as we enter the final stages of selecting a new president for New York City Transit, Tim Mulligan has assumed the role of acting president. I take this moment to publicly acknowledge Darrell Irick from the Bronx for his time as acting president. Darrell's dedication and leadership helped to move us forward over the last 9 months during a notably challenging and transformative period. Looking ahead, as we continue to focus on improving service for subway riders, we recognize the importance of focusing on all MTA services, with bus and paratransit operations being equally paramount among them. I know I speak for everyone, certainly members of this committee, as I thank you, Darrell, for a job well done, and Tim for assuming this critical leadership role at this critical time. Now, Acting President Mulligan.
Thank you, Chairman Ferrer. I'm pleased to serve at today's meeting as acting New York City Transit President, please be assured that although we are undergoing transition within the organization, we are nonetheless determined to continue to accelerate our efforts to improve the way we do business. As we've stated, one of our key commitments is to improve communications on all fronts, not just for our customers, but with the committee members and board members as well. It's our goal to keep you, our committee, and the MTA Board and the public appraised of our efforts and our progress to date on critical initiatives. We do this not only to inform, but also to seek your valued input and insights. Today we have a number of special reports planned for discussion, and I will begin with an update of the Subway Action Plan. Then we will proceed to reports provided in the special report section of your committee book. In a slightly different sequence, the paratransit presentation will be provided directly following the bus operations report, and the homeless outreach report will follow, and we will conclude with the recidivism report. Now I will begin with the Subway Action Plan. So we've had multiple discussions about what we are doing for the Subway Action Plan, our critical work involving track, signals, infrastructure, power stations, and car equipment. But I wanted to spend some time this morning talking about the where and the how of that work. As mentioned by some of our public speakers, we are focusing on priority corridors where a higher concentration of incidents related to right-of-way issues and failures as well as ridership is concentrated. I wanted to start that by looking at this visual that on the left-hand side gives you a heat map of major incidents system-wide that delayed more than 50 trains. And as you can see in the black box, the Lexington Avenue corridor is highlighted. On the right-hand side, you see the different clusters of signal issues, track issues, and water issues that are known in these areas. And this is a priority area for our work as we go forward. We're nearly 3 months in, and we are focusing on these priority corridor areas. Also, another priority corridor is the 6th and 8th Avenue and the IRT on the west side for the ACE and the BD&F, as well as the 1, 2, and 3. A third priority area is the downtown Brooklyn junction with the BMT and the IRT from Atlantic Avenue and Barclays Center through Borough Hall, including Myrtle and DeKalb. This is an important area of lines coming together, particularly issued on track issues there, affecting 4 different lines. We also have a priority area around the South Bronx IRT at 149th and Grand Concourse, and in Queens at Long Island City at the 60th Street connection and Queens Plaza for the E, the F, the M, the R, and the 7 lines coming together. Work is underway on all 6 priority corridors, and this little chart summarizes some of the individual initiatives and where we have been working already. As you know, we've been utilizing overtime and existing workforce in our initial weeks, but we've been hiring aggressively as well. To date, we have hired over 750 people into Subway Action Plan titles. And these initiatives show that with continuously welded rail, we're working in 4 of the 6 priority areas. Addressing track defects, we're working in every area. Cleaning between stations, which is work we've done, but we're accelerating to do the system, all the mileage of the subway system-wide. We are in 5 of the 6 areas, drainage and vent work to better handle the rain like that expected later this week is active in 5 out of the 6 areas. Grouting and leaking sealing in 3 of the 6, and repairs to the all-important signal system in 3 out of the 6 corridors. So that's just a snapshot of how we're prioritizing the work and what areas we're doing the work. I also want to highlight that these priority corridors, although they comprise less than 1/5 of the overall track mileage, they constitute more than 1/3 of the major incidents related to right-of-way issues. So we are getting our highest priority and biggest bang for our buck by focusing on these areas. And they also include more than 2/3 of our ridership of the system. So that's really...
When water infiltration is shown to be from a third party, either a business above the station or a building, a residential building, what's being done to those folks when you find that that's the case, as opposed to, say, rainwater or something else, like it's from a leaking pipe or a business that's disposing of their water in an incorrect fashion?
Winton?
Yes, good morning. We definitely will engage the third party to try to get remediation. Sometimes that has resulted in, such as on the Central Park West, we had an incident where a simple fire hydrant was left open and was getting down to the subway. So we engage the third party. We had a similar incident at Nevin Street, where we had to engage the third party, and we got resolution. So we definitely are much more aggressive in doing that, and we normally get resolution.
Also not depicted on this chart, there's additional work going on with cars. Hopefully you've seen some of the new modified for reliability as well as increased capacity E-trains that have seats removed at the end of the cars. We have 50 of the 100 that are expected this year already in service on the E-line. Modified cars for a pilot on the L are coming shortly. We've also reduced by more than 20% the count of cars that are out of service due to repair, and are running multiple different programs resolving door issues on different cars within our fleet. We're also working on power issues from the Con Ed side as the power comes into our system, improving our resiliency to be able to deal with power reliability, as well as attacking our elevator and escalator repairs, and hiring up for that effort, and looking to contract out where it's possible to sort of catch up with the backlog and maintenance on those issues. Moving forward to the biggest bang for the buck, this is the preliminary subway action plan budget, which should be familiar.
Can you say something about the chart? Is that possible?
You bet.
I'm a track worker, right? I'm looking at that. That's a data overview. But what the board never seems to get, and it's impossible, right, is the inside looking out view from a track worker perspective, a signal maintainer perspective. The amount of work going on in the subway right now is unfathomable. I've never seen this much sustained work. We've seen short bursts of work over the years, but this amount of sustained work has never happened before. The amount of garbage that's being hauled off the track. Go to one of the yards, 38th Street Yard, where you watch the dirt trains come back, or refuse trains come back, or Westchester Square Yard. The amount of broken down components that are being pulled out and offloaded by our track workers in the yards, having been replaced by brand new components, it's unfathomable. The amount of work going on is unbelievable in scope, and I don't think the chart quite projects that. It doesn't demonstrate that. And I mean, perhaps it would be valuable for the board to actually do maybe a tour of the subway on one of these jobs, or a couple of these jobs, to actually see the amount of work going on. It's astounding. It's to the point, and Habasham would be able to probably back me up on this, where it's at the point where there's not even enough track capacity on some nights to do the amount of work that we can do. I mean, we run out of track capacity to run passenger service and do the amount of maintenance and construction work that we're doing on any given night. It's a struggle to actually produce night in, night out the output that's going on in the subway. And that chart doesn't really get to the essence of it, the actual physical labor that's going on, that's put in to produce a chart like that. And it really is mind-boggling. It's this incredible industrial dance that goes on in the subway, this industrial ballet that goes on in the subway every night. It's like Brigadoon. It starts at 10 o'clock at night. By 5 o'clock at night, rush hour is restored. And this whole workforce is off the track, and rush hour begins again, and massive amounts of components are changed out, refuse is dragged off the tracks, and it just doesn't quite reflect the amount of intense labor that goes in to produce the data on those charts. And I just think it's worth noting.
I thank you for those comments, and all of our workers that are engaged in this complicated dance overnight and on the weekends. I recognize that recognition. I think that your field visit is a good idea, and your point of support is very important, because we'll get to the financial support in a minute, but it is also the support of protection and access to get workers out onto the track, the flaggers that are necessary, the train operators, the work trains, the flat cars, and we are very much taxing our ability to get all this work done in the priority that we're doing. And it's really, it's all hands on deck, and we're doing as much as we can, and it's affecting our customers as well. Moving from an overnight fast track from midnight, moving it up to 10 o'clock means that the service disruptions will occur earlier. It will have an impact. We are working on lines that are perhaps complements or substitutes to one another that we wouldn't have 6 months ago. So we thank our customers in advance. And we anticipate that this inconveniences in the next few months and service impact, although real, will be worth it in terms of long-term reliability, we'll gain from all these efforts that you highlighted.
And just one more thing, if I may. A lot of the work is being done in segregated tracks, general orders and whatnot, but still so much of this work is being done, particularly on the maintenance side. We're doing the work on the live traffic and live third rail still, and putting out a massive amount of production, massive production. And everybody needs to bear in mind that track workers and signal maintainers that are doing completely amped up massive amounts of production are doing it in a way that endangers their lives every time they step foot on those tracks, in terms of live third rails, a massive unforgiving work environment, trains bearing down on them, and it's extremely difficult work. And yet the production is happening, and the data will eventually reflect. It has to reflect, because the work is happening. The data will soon reflect. It'll match the amount of output that's going on. I don't know when the data metrics will begin to mesh with the amount of work that we're outputting, but it's coming soon. It has to come soon.
Just to complement Mr. Samuelson's points, on the West Side IRT now, there's a fast track notice about 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. Monday. I think we would do ourselves and our ridership a world of good if we explained what that work was for, how they will benefit from it, what is being addressed by this work, not just the trains are out between 10 and... I think communication is very important in an effort like this.
Absolutely. Go ahead, proceed. So moving on to the other resources that are necessary to support this important work. This is the preliminary subway action plan budget. It's the $836 total, which represents 2 years of the operating costs, as well as the capital associated with the program, ongoing costs to support the maintenance of the system once it's returned to a state of good repair, and that requires ongoing work and material as well. And the state has committed for half of this. In terms of our hiring, I updated you. We're at 764, I think, through today. As we continue, we have to resolve the underlying funding of this program. We will not be able to continue hiring at the pace and program we've been hiring past probably the end of January. So with the budget cycles for the city and the state both coming up, we're looking for additional appropriations and intentions and commitments of support so we can keep this program going. If that's not available, we have to pull back and look at how we prioritize or how we limit or scale down the efforts going forward, which is certainly not our priority or our desire, but just will be a reality that will be forced upon us by the fiscal consequences.
If it has to be scaled back, does that mean things will not get fixed, or they will take longer to get fixed?
It may be either or a combination of both. but we will try to do it rationally, look at what we've done, what's been successful, where we're seeing the biggest impact. But it's going to be an elimination. We're going to limit what we do, which is going to limit the impact. It's just inevitable.
Before Mr. Weisbrod, you do that, I know Mr. Samuelson has passed out a letter, and I acknowledge receipt of it. Let me simply suggest that at the conclusion of this presentation, comment on that letter would be, obviously in order.
I'd like to read the letter out.
Whatever you wish.
When you think the timing is correct.
At the conclusion of Mr. Mulligan's presentation, I think would be appropriate. Mr. Weisbrod.
I'm not recommending this, but there is another option here, which is a reallocation of existing resources, in addition to the question of whether, I'm hoping all the money will be there, but if the money is not there, there is a choice of either not doing it, which would be undesirable, stretching it out, which is undesirable, or reallocating resources. I'm just pointing out that that is another option.
All right. Anyone else? Please proceed, Mr. Mulligan.
That concludes my presentation. Any other questions on the Subway Action Plan?
Mr. Samuelson.
Yeah.
Back to you.
To Tim Mulligan's point, or to the comments that he made, it would be ludicrous to scale back on the successful MTA Subway Action Plan at this point. And I addressed much of it in a letter. I handed out the letter to the board members in a meeting, and I'd like to read the letter, if that's okay with you. To the Metropolitan Transportation Authority Board of Directors. As you know, the New York State Legislature in 2009 passed the Public Authorities Reform Act, which included a new legal obligation for board members overseeing public authorities. Under the law, board members have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the interest and the mission of the authority they are supervising. They must act in the best interest of the authority and the public. As MTA board members, your mandate is to do what is best for the institution of the MTA and its particular mission, which is to provide safe, reliable mass transit to the ridership. The MTA Emergency Response Action Plan, formulated by Chairman Loda and his staff, is clearly in the best interest of the MTA, the subway system, and most importantly, the riders. It is designed to accelerate repairs in order to restore reliability and increase efficiency. The total cost of the Emergency Action Plan is approximately $800 million, a little more. New York State has agreed to fund 50% of that plan. New York City, which has 4 voting representatives on the board, has refused to provide any funding to the additional elements of restoration. This is yet another example of the city abrogating its responsibility to the MTA and the riders. The city and all the members of this board are well aware of the city's ongoing failure to reimburse the MTA for services rendered on the city's behalf, such as student transportation, which is student Metro cards, and Access-a-Ride. There have been many conversations at the board level, and this has been over many years. The MTA has had correspondence with the city, clearly pointing out the city's legal and, I would argue, moral obligations on the issue of paratransit and student Metro cards. The laissez-faire behavior by the city has drained hundreds of millions of dollars each year, every single year, hundreds of millions of dollars from the MTA. And more importantly, from New York City Transit's operating and maintenance budget. This has hampered the authority's ability to serve the riders by keeping the subway system in a consistent state of reliability. The discussion at last week's board briefing about the possibility of having to scale back the scope and pace of subway repairs, which was actually just repeated here, currently being performed under the action plan, left me absolutely dismayed. The amount of maintenance, construction,
and inspection work being performed in the subway right now is absolutely unprecedented. We are now on the cusp of restoring real reliability back into the subway system. It would be an absolute travesty and a betrayal of our riders to scale back these efforts now after successfully beginning the task of getting our subways back on track. If this is allowed to happen, the MTA and this board will never, and I mean never, regain the trust of New York City Transit subway riders. Before we even had a discussion about slashing any elements of the action plan, this board needs to first address the shortchanging of the MTA by hundreds of millions of dollars annually for student Metro cards and paratransit. If the city continues to refuse to reimburse the MTA for services rendered on its behalf and continues to refuse to pay for half the critical action plan, it is incumbent on this board to take action to rectify this injustice. New York City cannot continue to have it both ways, simultaneously refusing to contribute toward the action plan and being a deadbeat on the reimbursement for services rendered. It's not right, it's not fair, and the New York City subway system can no longer afford to absorb the financial loss. The law is clear, the responsibility of the board is clear, and subway riders deserve accountability. Should the MTA board not act, I'm sure there are aggrieved parties, including riders and workers, willing to take legal action to force New York City to rethink its obligations. The truth of the matter is it's about $500 million a year in paratransit and student Metro cards that the city's failing to reimburse. This is peculiar to New York City, absolutely peculiar. Nassau County, Suffolk County, Westchester County, Putnam County, all of them in the MTA service region are all responsible for their own paratransit. They're all responsible for their local bus service. New York City has somehow carved themselves out, and they cannot have their cake and eat it too. They're getting a benefit that Nassau's not getting, Suffolk's not getting, Westchester and beyond are not getting. They cannot have their cake and eat it too. They can't, in a blasé fashion, sit around and say, we're not going to participate in the restoration of reliability back into the subway system, and then stick it to the MTA operating budget and drain money that could be put in very productive fashion back into reliability of the subway system, money that we can no longer use because we're funding New York City's obligation on paratransit and student Metro cards. Now, this is not for 1 second to downplay the importance of paratransit. I think collectively everybody recognizes the importance of providing paratransit and student Metro card services, but there has to be a reckoning. It's not the MTA's obligation, it's New York City's obligation, and it has to end. It's gone on for far too long, and the New York City subway system can no longer continue to absorb the cost. These are not good times for us. The subway is falling apart, and we can no longer afford it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samuelson. Is there anyone else who wishes to make comment on the subway action plan? Hearing none, then I'm happy to turn the meeting over with respect to the operations report to Winton Habersham.
Good morning. I'm pleased to announce that we've added our customer-focused performance metrics to the subway monthly operations report in this month's agenda. These measures, which Acting President Mulligan and Peter Caffiero outlined last month, include major incidents, service delivered, and additional platform time, as well as train time. All the new metrics are based on full electronic data and are reported using monthly averages to allow the committee to see effects of the initiatives under the Subway Action Plan on a quicker time frame. We also include system-wide and subdivision-level 12-month rolling averages in addition to monthly performance to smooth out seasonal variability and maintain the level of data previously reported. For the additional platform time and additional train time metrics, we present 13 months of data for the A division. As mentioned last month, we have only recently begun receiving detailed information on the B division train locations using recently installed train tracking technology required to calculate these metrics. So we have data on the letter lines back to March of 2017. Legacy indicators, including weight assessment, terminal on-time performance, and trains delayed, will continue to be reported in the second section of the report. Overall, weekday subway performance is showing evidence of stabilization, especially in July and August. In both months, weekday major incidents, service delivery, and additional train time and platform time in the A division due to data availability beat the 12-month average. Additional platform time and additional train time showed improvement in August from May and June 2017, while service delivered improved in August from May and June levels. While there were more weekday major incidents in August than a year ago, the August performance was better than the 12-month average due to a combination of internal and external factors. August is aided by the lack of inclement weather, but more of the improvement was due to fewer signal and infrastructure incidents. This was partly offset by an increase in major track incidents and persons on the track roadbed. I'd like to also note why we're focusing on major incidents. These incidents have an outsized impact on our customers. For example, on August 22nd, a smoke condition at 125th Street on the ABCD lasted 1.5 hours and resulted in 208 delayed trains. If this incident had not occurred, the additional platform time and additional train time metrics for the entire month would have been better on those lines. On the A train, for instance, the additional platform and train times for the whole month would have been 6 to 7% better. Although there are encouraging signs in the July and August performance figures, we still face many challenges as we work to improve the reliability of the subway service in the long term. Toward that end, we continue to make progress implementing the Subway Action Plan. For instance, we're clearing drains and sealing leaks in high-priority corridors, as Acting President Mulligan noted. We are cleaning tracks between stations, accelerating track defect and signal repairs, and have work underway to minimize the impact of Con Edison power outages. We're continuing to onboard staff in critical titles and are planning right-of-way work to ensure maximization of available outages. I'd like to especially, though, highlight the EMT program for a moment. When a customer becomes ill on the subway, train staff are required to remain with the passenger until help arrives, effectively stopping the train and delaying all passengers. To provide a faster response to sick customers and reduce delays, EMTs have now been rolled out in the AM and PM rush hours at 12 locations, 7 of which were deployed on October 16th. EMTs are now located at Fulton Street, West 4th Street, 14th Street, 42nd Street, 59th Street, and 125th Street, all on the 8th Avenue line. There are also EMTs at 14th Street in Union Square, 42nd Street in Grand Central, 59th in Lex, Roosevelt Avenue in Jackson Heights, and 125th Street in Lexington Avenue, and lastly, 149th Street in Grand Concourse. 5 locations Fulton, West 4th, 14th, 59th, and 125th on the 8th Avenue corridor have been fully covered since August. The EMTs are able to provide assistance beyond these 5 locations. EMTs from these locations have responded to a total of 57 incidents between July and October 10th, 10 of which were at stations outside of the 5 locations. I might just pause for a second. It's interesting because in gathering the data this month, I noticed that another report showed that we only had 41 deployments of the EMTs for sick customers. And as I got background information, I learned that the discrepancy was based on the fact that there was no impact to service. So the EMT was deployed, but they were deployed and were able to manage the incident and help the customer before it had any impact to service. So that really does show that that program is starting to work. Switching now to the fleet, the 12-month fleet MDBF in August was 117,414, which is 2.3% higher than last year. This is the first time that the year-over-year 12-month MDBF has shown an increase since August of 2015. The monthly fleet MDBF in August was 100,186, which is 13.5% higher than last August. This concludes our operating report. Thank you.
Now I'd like, oh, yes, Mr. Albert.
Whitten, do the EMTs stationed on the 8th Avenue line, can they go, if there's an emergency, to the 7th Avenue line? Can they leave the system and go out on the street and then just come down into the next line if they're called for?
They can, Commissioner, and they have, actually. Not to 7th Avenue necessarily, but one of the first deployments and responses that was made early on was at Broadway Lafayette. So they're stationed at West, that particular EMT is stationed at West 4th Street, and he was able to help a young person, actually a teenager, at Broadway Lafayette. So yes, they certainly are capable and allowed to do that. But that has to often be a strategic decision.
The other thing I wanted to ask you was, if you look at the legacy indicators, the 5 line continues to have big problems. Have you been able to identify the really precipitous drop in weight assessment on the 5 to a particular type of incident, or just late breaking GOs, or sick customers, or signals, or whatever the cause might be?
Primarily on the 5, and we're really getting to that tail end of it, but a lot of it has to do with what's happening on the Dyer line with the signal modernization work. We still do have some weekend general orders out there, but a lot of that work is being performed during the day, during the week, and that does impact service.
On the weekend GOs, where the 2 is actually routed to the Dyer line, yeah. Would that affect the 5's statistics or the 2's statistics?
So what we're finding is that we're just reducing a lot of the service overall on the IRT, particularly on the weekend, but during the week as well, because of Clark Street, right? Sometimes because of the general orders in the Bronx as well, and we're finding that there's a lot of. It just takes a lot longer time for these trains to get to their destinations, in large part because of the crowding that's on these lines. It's been a reduction in service, a net reduction in service, and so that's affecting our ability to get trains through the corridors as effectively.
Finally, I just want to say that the new indicators with excess waiting time and excess travel time are really wonderful. I think they give people a much better picture of what's happening on the system than the legacy did. Legacy is important to you, but for the rider, these new things are great, and I really appreciate the work that went into putting these in.
Thank you. And I'd be remiss if I didn't express appreciation also to the Transit Riders Council and PCAC for working with us in putting some of that together.
Thank you so much.
Any other comment on the operations report? Mr. Weisbrot.
Yes, I don't know, Mr. Happersham, if this is a question to you. It's a slightly broader question, whether it's to you or to Mr. Mulligan. I know that it's not, we don't have it as a operational indicator, but as a financial indicator, passenger ridership on both the subways and buses have been declining gradually over the last year plus at a time when city employment, city population has gone way up. So do you or Mr. Mulligan or the MTA generally have a sense of why that is happening?
I'm going to defer to.
It's something we're continuing to look at. I would point out that my colleagues in other cities that we talk to throughout North America have seen a similar, in fact, in many cities, a greater decline in the last year and a half. So there are a number of factors that are being hypothesized about that, and each city has its own story of things going on in them. But certainly the amount of work going on here on weekends, as has been explained, is having a significant impact on our service, and that may be part of what's going on.
Is that is the decline attributable entirely to the weekends? And I actually also noticed that certainly recently toll traffic on the tolled bridges is also declining. So it seems unclear where all this employment population is, or how they are actually getting around.
I can't speak to the bridges, but in terms of transit, both nationally and in New York, it's particularly an off-peak phenomenon, and that's where we're particularly seeing here is more in the off-peak periods.
Is there any other question on Mr. Greenberg?
First, regarding ridership, which I was going to bring up maybe at finance, but still here. I really do think that we're in competition with, especially off-peak, with Uber and Lyft in a very real way. I mean, if anyone ever does trips on their phone, you get an offer for the first trip free. So that makes people, I don't like, well, anyway. And regardless of that, I think that's something we have to face, and what they're doing is pricing low so they could get people in, probably underpricing, and it's also creating real estate issues. There's been a couple of articles about that. I don't really know how we could address it or combat it, but we are seeing a continual decline. And the other issue is bus service, and that's, I could wait till then. The question I have about the performance indicators, I just want to say again, as I said last month, I think we've moved a leap forward in the performance indicators we're now showing, especially the new ones. On the legacy ones, I would like to know, why did we change weight assessment and some of the, actually almost all of them, to a month comparison, month to month a year ago, rather than the 12-month rolling average? And especially since we do show month to month on the new indicators, I'm just wondering why that shift was made at this time.
Well, we, particularly for weight assessment, had shown 12-month rolling because originally that was all we could do when it was a sampled data, and now we can show the individual months as on-time performance has always been shown, and we do have the 12-month rolling average as well, indicated on the bottom of the report.
I just didn't see the line by. I mean, it's available anyway. I didn't see a line by line rolling average number for weight assessment, which we had always shown. I mean, the reason. Let me explain why I think that's having a rolling average is good for a trend analysis as opposed to, it improved over the month. I felt with the other indicators, those could show very well, that we're actually addressing the problems we have, and that the trend was a good thing to. I mean, we're also showing rolling average on those as well, but I do like to see, especially weight assessment, which to me is like more of a general picture of what's going on everywhere, and maybe for us as opposed to passengers who want to see, how much is the average delay I'm faced with on my line. So that's the kind of that was my view. I'm just wondering why we had shifted, but
We can get those numbers
up
to
to
you. As we've said before, the
Yeah.
intention is to supplement, not supplant, any of the data you
Mhm.
received from before, so we'll make sure you get.
All right, thank you.
There's no one else. I'd like to ask Mr. Irick to address bus performance indicators.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to start with some good news for our bus customers. A resolution for a dual bus lane on Fifth Avenue between 61st Street and 34th Street was approved on October the 12th. Together with DOT, it is one of our most important and impactful bus enhancement projects to be delivered this year. Fifth Avenue serves 75,000 bus riders every weekday on 39 routes. This represents an important victory for our customers, who will experience improved bus travels and service reliability on the city's busiest corridor. Also, as a reminder, we will be launching the Q52, 53 select bus service on Woodhaven and Cross Bay Boulevards on November 12th. These will be New York City's 16th and 17th select bus service routes, which will provide travel time and reliability improvements for over 20,000 average weekday customers across a large area of Queens. As requested by this committee, over the next several months, we will be providing updates on a number of strategies to improve the speed and reliability of bus service. Today, I want to update you regarding our plans to roll out Traffic Signal Priority, or TSP, another important joint initiative with New York City Department of Transportation. As you may know, TSP uses onboard technology to reduce time spent by buses at traffic signals. When a bus approaches an intersection, it sends a signal to the DOT Traffic Management Center, which then communicates with the traffic light at the intersection to either extend the green light or shorten the red light appropriately. TSP is currently active on 6 select bus service routes: the M15, BX41, Brooklyn 44, Staten Island 79, and the Brooklyn 46, and most recently the Queens 44, which was activated in September. As you may recall, in July, the board approved a procurement for a software solution enabling remote deployment throughout the bus fleet beginning in December of this year. Working jointly with New York City DOT to expand the system, by the end of next year, 6 more routes will have been activated, which will include the M60, Q25, Staten Island 62, 92, Queens 43, and the Q5. And we will also begin implementation of TSP on the Q52-53 on Woodhaven Boulevard. I'd now like to focus my attention to paratransit. In June, Steve Lopiano, Vice President of Paratransit, presented strategies to implement a more customer-centric, transparent paratransit system in response to concerns from our riders and advocates. These strategies embrace new technologies and ways of doing business. In just a moment, Steve will provide you with a progress update and details on our implementation plan. Among other things, he will highlight 2 significant milestones that were reached in the last few months. First, the Paratransit Customer Bill of Rights, which was finalized at the end of September and clearly defines the high quality of service that our customers deserve. In addition, a second important milestone, the Paratransit e-Hail pilot, was officially launched this month on October the 11th. And before I end, I want to wish good luck to 17 of our MTA employees that will participate in the New York State Bus Rodeo this weekend. We wish them the best. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank Steve Vidal and Craig Cipriano for supporting me during my assignment as acting president of New York City Transit. And I'd like to turn the meeting over to Steve.
Mr. Lopiano, we are eagerly awaiting your report.
Good morning. First, I'd like to touch very, very briefly on the Accessoride Bill of Rights. In June, Managing Director Hakem committed to developing an Accessoride Bill of Rights, and to begin the process, what we did is we conducted a review of other transit agencies and got feedback from Boston, LA, New Jersey Transit, and Washington, D.C. A draft, which was much less detailed than the one that's currently available, was presented to the Paratransit Advisory Committee for review and comment at the July meeting that we hold with them. Also in attendance was the Mayor's Office of Peoples with Disabilities Commissioner, Victor Calisi, and he participated very much in the discussion. The Paratransit Advisory Committee is comprised of 15 members that use Access-a-Ride and represent groups that advocate for people with disabilities, and we meet with them every other month. Finally, a draft was sent to the AAR Reform Group for their comment and input. The Bill of Rights addresses all Access-a-Ride customer touchpoints, including the eligibility process, the scheduling of trips, service delivery, the performance of our drivers, the condition of our vehicles, and how management follows up on customer complaints. The Bill of Rights is being posted in the Access-a-Ride magazine On the Move, which is mailed to all of our 147 registrants. Will be posted on the MTA website, all dedicated vehicles, our call center, the assessment centers, contractor workplaces, and in AAR offices, so that our employees and contractors will know what is expected of them when dealing with our customers. Finally, as with all paratransit communications, it will be formatted in a way so that it's accessible to all our customers. Okay, moving to the milestone report. In the report submitted to the board in July, a series of initiatives to improve paratransit service quality were presented and discussed. These included building more efficient schedules to improve on-time performance and reduce ride times, new ways for customers to book, track, and review service, and new customer-focused metrics to measure and drive continued improvements in service. In this report, I will address the status of each of the initiatives listed. The recently begun eHealth pilot will continue for 1 year and currently includes one vendor, Verifone, which provides app-based trips to yellow and green taxis. We hope to add additional vendors to the pilot and are currently evaluating several companies for inclusion. eHealth provides additional travel benefits for our customers, including the ability to book trips on demand and no upfront costs other than the transit fare for our customers. Enhanced service quality performance metrics. We are currently developing service quality metrics to be incorporated into the MTA dashboard. The metrics will include on-time performance, ride duration, and customer service quality measures, including complaints and call center and eligibility process performance. Reporting will begin in January 2018. The Manage My Trip website enhancement allows customers to book trips on Access-a-Ride's website and receive an immediate confirmation of the trip. Where's My Trip will allow customers using computers or smartphones to track their vehicle up to 1 hour prior to their scheduled pickup and receive continuous ETAs as the vehicle approaches. The enhancement is currently completed and is being tested. It is on target for release in the fourth quarter of this year. My Access-a-Ride mobile app. The My Access-a-Ride mobile app is a one-stop gateway to all facets of Access-a-Ride. It will provide existing customers the ability to book, track, and rate trips, as well as review their eligibility profiles. Potential customers will be able to start the eligibility process and schedule an appointment to be evaluated. We are working closely with MTA IT on this project, which is currently in the scoping and planning phase. The app is scheduled for release in the fourth quarter of 2018. New schedule and dispatch engine and new AVLM system. We are replacing our current scheduling and dispatch engine and automatic vehicle location and management system, which are over 12 years old, with new state-of-the-art systems. These new systems will enable the construction of efficient schedules with shorter ride times, in addition to providing the dynamic dispatching tools to improve on-time performance. RFI responses have been reviewed, and the scope of work will be completed very shortly. An RFP award is planned in the first quarter of next year. Beneficial use will commence in the first quarter of 2019. That concludes my report.
Are there any questions of Mr. Lopiano? If there are none, I have one.
I have one too.
I'm sorry?
I have one also.
Mr. Reckler, then, please proceed.
Just, I appreciate the report. On the Verifone, does that also offer customers the opportunity to provide feedback on that app that's being set up there?
Yes, it does, but it goes directly to Verifone, which is then transferring that data to us.
Okay. And then just on the My Accessoride, the mobile app, I mean, if fourth quarter of 2018 seems like a long time to develop an app that obviously, others, Uber, Lyft, and others have similar type apps. Is there any way we can leverage some pre-existing groups out there to see if we can form some strategic venture versus having to reinvent this ourselves?
You're absolutely right. At this point, we're just scoping it out, figuring out what kind of applications we would like included in the app, and then we're going to determine the best way to move it forward. And that may be by contracting with an existing app company that has something that's very close to that so that we could save a lot of time. There's also the possibility of building it ourselves. Either way, we want to own the app so that we can control the content. And you're right. I think there are ways that we can move it forward quicker.
Because also there's firms like Ford that has something they call Chariot, for example, that has an app that they'll let you take it and brand it and own that data. We're doing it for some commercial uses. So I'd encourage you to try to leverage any pre-existing commercial applications versus trying to reinvent it.
We certainly will explore those possibilities.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I've already raised this with you. I'm very concerned when you showed me the statistics of how many people who are elderly are using this system, and something like 23% are computer literate.
That is correct.
That how is this new app-based system going to work for these populations, and is there any special provision you're going to provide for them other than just a call center, which basically leaves them back where they were to a certain extent?
Right. So I think the issue is how are we going to do on-demand service for customers that don't have the smartphones and the computer savvy to currently use the system we're developing. And I think one of the things we're definitely doing is we're also including the possibility for those customers to call us directly when they want to travel on the same day. And as we discussed previously, we've met with some groups and are planning to meet with another group very shortly that is going to help us in ways of providing information and training to our customers so that they'll be better able to use the new apps.
Yeah, I would just suggest AARP obviously has been struggling with this nationally and locally in terms of trying to find very low-cost smartphones that are very easy to use for the elderly. And since you have to have an interaction when any person comes to register, the potential to essentially provide at cost smartphones to people who want this kind of service and train them right there, since you've got them as a captive audience. It may not reach everybody, but I think it could start to break in, particularly with the elderly, in terms of getting them somewhat connected and giving them another option.
You're absolutely right, and we're definitely going down that path.
Yeah, I would add another suggestion on that front is working on some of the voice recognition, whether it's Alexa, Siri, others, that if you're going to be creating something that they've become very effective now with just being able to hear normal English and respond and interact with the internet. So it's another alternative.
Is there anyone else? Then I didn't have a question. Actually, Mr. Reckler asked it, but I want to go back to his question and the answer, because when we first began speaking of this about 2 quarters ago, it seems like waiting 4 more quarters is unconscionably long. So I would urge you and everyone else, as I did with Mr. Mulligan privately, to speed this timetable up. We've had enough time at it. We know what we've got to do. And I'm looking to see some progress in the coming months.
We're committed to that, Chairman Farrell. Committed to that.
Is there anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Lopiano. Then we seem to be ready for safety, and Cheryl Kennedy.
Okay. Turning to the first grid on safety performance, results were as follows. With the exception of fires, all items discussed refer to rates. Subway customer accidents increased when comparing the 12-month period of August 2016 through July 2017 with the prior 12 months. However, accidents were down on a monthly basis. Subway fires had a slight increase when comparing September 2016 through August 2017 with the prior 12-month period. However, they decreased from last month's total. 99% of the fires reported for the 12-month period were lower average severity. Bus collisions and collision injuries were down when comparing September 2016 through August 2017 with the prior 12-month period. Customer accidents were higher when comparing them for the same periods. Employee lost time accidents for the 12 months ending August 2017 decreased significantly when compared to the previous 12 months. As noted on the second grid on leading indicators, progress toward the goals continues, and we do not foresee any issues or barriers to achieving our reported goals. That completes the safety report.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that? If there are none, then I'd like to ask Chief Coogan to address the crime report.
Okay, good morning. Total major felonies in transit are down 1.4% through September, with 25 fewer incidents. Year-to-date, there are 11 fewer grand larcenies, down 0.9%, and 35 fewer robberies, a 9.5% decline. Felony assaults were up slightly for the year, with 7 more incidents than the same period last year, up 3%. During the month of September, transit crime fell 10.9%, with 23 fewer incidents during the month. The overall decline can be attributed to decreases in grand larcenies with 31 fewer incidents and felony assaults with 7 fewer incidents. In fact, this September was the safest September in our subway since 2010. The year-to-date number of major felonies per day decreased from 6.5 to 6.4, and the year-to-date decline in robberies has brought the average number of these incidents each day down from 1.3 to 1.2. Total violent crimes, murder, rape, robbery, and assault combined remain down year-to-date in transit with a 3.8% decrease. 34% of the total major felonies last month were committed in Manhattan, 33% in Brooklyn, 18% in the Bronx, and 15% in Queens. We are encouraged by a number of recent grand larceny arrests, particularly from sleeping passengers. In fact, during the first week of October, there were 7 grand larceny arrests, including 6 from sleeping riders. This is a remarkable number of arrests during 1 week, including 4 in just 1 night. Perhaps even more noteworthy is that the suspects were each apprehended on scene immediately, and each had a lengthy criminal history. A brief update on some recent arrests for bias-motivated crimes in transit. On August 9th, Transit District 30, Officer Lauren Garcia arrested 72-year-old Arnold Moody after he attempted to stab a man with a knife while making statements indicating he was motivated by his perception of the victim's sexual orientation. He was subsequently charged with attempted felony assault, assault as a hate crime, menacing as a hate crime, criminal possession of a weapon, and first-degree harassment. He remains in custody on $15,000 bail. Additionally, on September 13th, District 20 Officer Gina Brown arrested 40-year-old Demetrius Zayas for assault as a hate crime. Zayas is accused of punching 2 women while making anti-Muslim remarks. He also remains in custody awaiting his next court appearance on $50,000 bail. Finally, I want to acknowledge some outstanding work by one of our subway conductors. At about 1:30 in the morning on October 8th, a quick-thinking conductor on the A train intervened as a perpetrator attempted to flee after committing a violent, slashing assault at the Beach 60th Street station. This conductor not only attempted to block the suspect, but provided critical details to our officers. Thankfully, the suspect was arrested days later for a pattern of such assaults in the street and in transit, and is currently in custody awaiting his next court appearance. Later in his shift, this same conductor played a key role in one of the very arrests I mentioned moments ago. After witnessing a man attempting to remove property from sleeping passengers aboard his train, he summons our officers in the station, who made an immediate arrest. The individual, Tyrell Sims, was charged with attempted grand larceny. He has 39 prior arrests, including for several grand larceny and robbery, and is in custody on $50,000 bail. Of course, this conductor is just one of many members of New York City Transit who have gone above and beyond to help riders. They each have good reason to be proud of their role on the front lines of our effort to keep the subway safe. I thank you for the opportunity to update you once again and welcome any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any, Mr. Glucksman and then Mr. Jones?
Since my colleague, Commissioner Myrtle, is not here, I have to ask you, how can we have an 1,150% increase in Semitic hate crimes on page 61? How can, I just don't understand how that can be. I said, on page 61, we have a report of 1,150% increase in Semitic crimes. How can this be?
Anti-Semitic crimes, for the year, we have 25 versus 2. And again, most of those are graffiti, criminal mischief or graffiti, where they're writing anti-Semitic remarks. The criminal mischief is 27 versus 3, so that accounts for that,
Is it
those numbers.
The same person, or these are all
It was
different?
mostly in the beginning of the year. We didn't make an arrest on any of them. The Hate Crimes Task Force has cases on all of those. But again, that was mostly in January and February. We have had some since then, but the bulk of them were in the beginning of the year.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I'm sounding like a broken record, Chief, but I'm still looking for a breakdown of the tab summonses for fare evasion by station and by race and gender. It would be very useful for us to figure out, not to stop what you're doing, but at least to target those stations that seem to have an overabundance of this kind of behavior, particularly among the young.
Yes.
So again, I would like those statistics.
Yes, we can. We've given them to you before.
Yeah.
We can
I
give
think
them to
I'd
you
like
again.
them reported, actually,
I
as we go
testified.
along.
Let me speak.
I'm sorry, sir.
I testified before the City Council last week, given that exact data.
Okay.
There is a bill that's going forth in the City Council that, of course, you were pushing.
Right.
And, we are going through with that, and
Okay.
the police department has agreed to give all that information over, quarterly, I believe, to the City Council.
Okay. It would be
And
useful
then
to
I
have
did
this
give the
board.
10 top stations.
Right.
Which Grand Central was one of them, I remember. Penn Station, on 49th and 3rd, that's 3 of the stations. Well, we can get you that anytime you want. We
Okay,
have
I'd
that
like it as
information. It's
part of
very
the
easy.
reports you make to this board. It would be very
Excuse me?
useful. Okay?
I couldn't hear you.
If we could have that reported, just as you do, hate crimes and the rest in this report, as we come forward, it would be very useful, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Well, I was going to ask to see the station-by-station report. I don't know if it's too lengthy to put in the book. If it is, I still like to see it, because I did hear complaints about, particularly the stations in Jamaica, about there being a lot of, whether it's arrests or TAB summonses regarding young people and those.
What are we talking about? The top 10 stations for arrests and tab summonses?
Well, I'd love to see something. Well, my particular concern was what someone told me about the stations in Jamaica, which means the ENF lines, Sutphin, Parsons, those stations. I had been told, people complained about it. They thought there were a lot of whether TAB summons issues or even arrests of students, and I just would love to see those.
Like I say, I don't believe that they were in the top 10.
Well, I'd like to see where they were then.
Okay.
If you could just supply it to anyone who wants to see it. On the anti-Semitic, and even any of the hate crimes, but anti-Semitic seems to be overwhelming here. It's good to hear that maybe there's been a drop-off, but I just wanted, as Commissioner Myrtle mentioned, and I have no, my history is my family came here way before the Holocaust. However, they probably came here for other reasons similar to that. There is a sensitivity to those types of issues because of the history. I don't think it's. I think it's very much justified, and I think they should be, very strongly addressed. Even if some people may think we're putting an unfair amount of resources on something that's merely graffiti. I think hate graffiti is very serious. It has a history of being serious, and I think it should be addressed very aggressively.
We do take it very seriously. We have a hate crimes unit that's in part of the Detective Bureau. They take a case on any hate crime, whether it be graffiti or an assault or some, serious injury to somebody. Like I said, just graffiti. They take a case on that. It's taken very seriously. Sometimes, we need camera footage or a witness.
I understand.
So the graffiti sometimes does get hard to solve, unless, like I said, you have some video on it or, a witness that can come forward. But
Thank you.
We do take a case on each individual, graffiti, hate crime incident.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. There's nothing else. Appreciate your report, and I'll ask Mr. Cipriano to make the transit finance report.
Preliminary August 2017 New York City Transit farebox revenue of $382.4 million was $6 million or 1.5% below forecast. Year-to-date revenue was $2,961.3 million, $15.4 million or 0.5% below forecast. Preliminary August 2017 New York City Transit operating expenses exceeded forecast by $22.3 million or 3.3%. Labor expenses were above forecast by $30.8 million, 5.8%, due largely to higher overtime requirements. Non-labor expenses were lower than forecast by $8.5 million, 5.5%. Year-to-date operating expenses were lower than forecast by $41 million, 0.8%, due primarily to non-labor expense underruns. August 2017 New York City Transit ridership totaled 191.3 million, 1.7% below forecast. August 2017 New York City Transit average weekday ridership results compared to August 2016 were as follows. Average weekday subway ridership was 5.2 million, a decrease of 1.5%. Average weekday local bus ridership was 1.7 million, a decrease of 6.9%. Express bus ridership was 39,000, a decrease of 2.2%, and paratransit ridership was 28,000, a decrease of 0.3%. An early look at preliminary September 2017 financial results. Preliminary September 2017 farebox revenue of $377.5 million was $3.5 million, 0.9% below forecast, mainly due to lower than projected subway and bus ridership. Preliminary September 2017 operating expenses exceeded forecast by $16.8 million, 2.7%, due mostly to higher overtime. That concludes my report.
Are there any questions on transit finance? Hearing none, I'd like to call Darrell. I'm sorry. Excuse me, Mr. Greenberg.
I probably should have mentioned it at the bus operations report, but in looking at ridership, we continue to see declines on bus. We've discussed this. I have there's an article today about efforts by the city to try to reduce congestion in Manhattan mostly, and I think it's at Flatbush Avenue and Roosevelt Avenue. I still see issues in Queens, particularly Western Queens. I hear complaints. I could give you the 3 bus lines I hear most complaints about, and it really does have to do with congestion. I don't know how we can work with the city to address some of these issues. I was happy to see a comment about the Q5. I think it's great to focus on that, and that Southeastern Queens service, because they need that. But I could give you, the Q39, Q60, Q66, that's Northern Boulevard, Queens Boulevard, and also the service between, I think, Ridgewood, Maspeth, and Queens Plaza, which has been awful and extremely erratic, and that may be because of traffic issues, but I think we should take a look at it, maybe jointly with the city, in addressing some of that. Those buses are crowded. A lot of people are carried with them. I think we're probably losing ridership, especially off-peak, to Uber and Lyft right there that I know of. That's my personal, and I'm sure it's throughout Queens. So whatever we could do in conjunction with the city to start moving quickly would be very good on that. The ridership numbers are not good, and they're painful, and it's painful to hear people complain and say, I'm going to take Uber or Lyft.
Alternative services.
Right.
Yep.
Thank
Agreed.
you.
And for the bus ridership report, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Irick.
Okay, so we'll start with finance. August 2017 year-to-date preliminary farebox revenue was $143 million, or 0.7% above forecast. MTA bus year-to-date non-reimbursable expenses were below forecast by $12.2 million, or 2.5%. Labor expenses were under forecast by $5.3 million, primarily due to lower health and welfare and OPEB current claims and the favorable timing of workers' compensation claims. This was partly offset by higher overtime expenses, primarily due to additional running time/traffic, including the LIRR shuttle and availability. Non-labor expenses were favorable by $6.9 million, primarily due to the timing of maintenance contract work. On to ridership. MTA bus preliminary ridership for August 2017 was 10.2 million riders, or 2.1% below the budget. The 12-month rolling average through August 2017 showed a decline of 2.2% in the weekday ridership and remained relatively flat for the same period for weekend ridership as compared to the prior year. And this concludes my report on finance and ridership for the MTA Bus Company. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Irick. Are there any questions on the bus finance part of this report? If there are none, then I'd like to ask John O'Grady to discuss the capital program.
Good morning. Looking at capital program results, commitments during August 2017 totaled $191.2 million. This included the rehabilitation of 2 circuit breaker houses and construction of 2 new substations at Maspeth Avenue and Harrison Place to support increased capacity for the future on the Canarsie line, along with construction of 2 new power substations in the vicinity of New Dorp and Clifton stations on the Staten Island Railroad. Meanwhile, completions during the month of August totaled $162.9 million. This included the $103 million rehabilitation of the Cranberry tubes, the 4th completed out of the 9 damaged underriver tubes following damage caused by flooding from Superstorm Sandy, and Help Point kiosk installation at 7 stations in the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn. Thank you.
Questions on the remainder of the operation, on the entirety of the operations report? If there are none, then I'll ask Steve Plachaki to discuss procurements.
Good morning. The procurement package, which presents New York City Transit and MTACC procurements, includes 9 actions totaling $398.4 million in expenditures. I would like to highlight 2 procurement actions included in this month's agenda. The first action I would like to highlight is for the award of a competitively solicited and negotiated design-build contract for Package 3 of the Enhanced Station Initiative Program for the design and construction of improvements at the 72nd Street, 86th Street, Cathedral Parkway, 110th Street, and 163rd Street stations along the 8th Avenue line in the borough of Manhattan to Echo 3 Enterprises in the amount of $111,190,000 and a duration of 13.5 months. This is the third of several construction contracts to be awarded under the ESI program. The contract will provide for enhancements that will feature an improved customer experience and result in stations that are cleaner and brighter and easier to navigate through the use of more intuitive wayfinding and the inclusion of 21st century amenities such as Wi-Fi and cellular connectivity. 4 proposals were received in August 2017. Echo 3 and Judlow Contracting Incorporated were selected to participate in negotiations which included discussions of schedule and overall cost. Upon review of the best and final offers from both firms, Judlow was initially recommended for award as their proposal was determined to offer the best overall value to New York City Transit. The recommendation for award to Judlow was presented to the September New York City Transit Committee, who, citing ongoing performance issues on MTACC's project for the reconstruction of the Cortlandt Street Station, rejected the recommendation and requested that New York City Transit consider an agreement with the next preferred proposer, Echo 3. Echo 3 was contacted by senior procurement management staff and requested to revisit its best and final offer and consider whether any additional schedule improvements could be made or price concession offered. Echo 3 reduced their best and final offer price by $2 million and offered schedule improvements, including reducing the overall contract duration from 14 months to 13.5 months and further reducing its bypass durations by an additional 28 days. Echo 3's final proposal includes a cost of $111,190,000, a total duration of 13.5 months, and a combined reduction of 181 days for the 4-station bypass. This is comparable to Judlow's proposed total reduction. In fact, with the additional reductions proposed by Echo 3, 2 of the 4 stations have shorter durations than what was proposed by Judlow. This contract recommendation for Echo 3 was presented for approval during the September board meeting, at which time board members requested additional time to review and consider the recommended award. it was decided that the ECHO 3 award recommendation be held over and presented during the October board cycle. In addition, procurement sought to obtain further concessions beyond the prior cost and schedule reductions, but despite these efforts, they were not attainable. Nevertheless, the proposed $111,190,000 award amount is still approximately $10 million lower than the next proposal submitted by CFJV and with a significantly better bypass schedule. The difference in pricing between Judlow and ECHO 3 can be largely attributed to the strength of ECHO 3's design and construction approach and project management plan. These are the elements that resulted in ECHO 3 being the most technically preferred proposer. In addition, a question was raised at the September board meeting as to why the ECHO 3 proposed award amount was approximately $5.3 million more than its initial proposal. As indicated in the staff summary, $3 million of this increase is attributed to the added allowance for replacement of electrical equipment at the 72nd and 86th Street stations. The balance of the increase by ECHO 3 resulted from the final insurance premium quotation that was greater than the originally projected. The second action I would like to highlight is the award of options to purchase a total of 180 low-floor 60-foot articulated buses from New Flyer and Nova Bus. These buses will replace both 40-foot and 60-foot buses from the New York City Transit fleet, which are beyond their 12-year service life. The total combined estimated value of these awards will be approximately $150.1 million. The base contracts were awarded through a competitively negotiated request for proposal process, resulting in a split award to New Flyer and Nova Bus for 139 and 92 buses, respectively. This current procurement for 180 buses was conducted utilizing the competitive runoff option procedure as approved by the November 2015 board, through which both New Flyer and Nova Bus competed by submitting proposals for option buses. After negotiations and review, each proposer's fully compliant best and final offer, New York City Transit Selection Committee unanimously recommended a split award, with 60% of the buses being awarded to New Flyer and 40% to Nova Bus. The Selection Committee's unanimous recommendation was based on New Flyer offering the most competitive pricing, receiving a superior technical evaluation, and providing a significantly better delivery schedule. In addition to its fully compliant BAFO, Nova Bus submitted an alternate best and final offer that offered an accelerated delivery schedule beginning 77 weeks earlier than its fully compliant best and final offer, and a significantly lower price, saving approximately $30,000 per bus. While Nova's alternate best and final offer does not include some mechanical and industrial improvements that require significant engineering hours, it meets or exceeds the technical specifications of the buses being delivered under the base contract. After a thorough review, the Department of Buses decided to take advantage of the alternate best and final offer by Nova Bus due to the urgent need for buses. Splitting the award between the two bus manufacturers shortens the delivery schedule by up to 22 weeks, continues to foster price and technological competition, and mitigates potential performance and supply risks associated with orders of this size. New Flyer will receive an award of 108 buses in the estimated amount of $90.1 million, and Nova Bus will receive an award of 72 buses in the estimated amount of $60 million. The pricing for both awards has been determined to be fair and reasonable. The combined delivery of production buses will be from September 2018 through September 2019. I request your approval of all items in the agenda.
Questions and comments? May I have a motion on this?
A motion to approve, but I do have a comment.
Okay, sure. Is there a second? Okay. Any questions?
Yes. On the ECHO contract, which I applaud you for negotiating a very favorable arrangement with ECHO, so congratulations and thanks. But I do have a question about the scope of it. Are these 4 stations currently handicapped accessible, disabled accessible, and will, if they're not, will the ECHO enhancement, will their work bring them up to accessibility?
I'll ask John O'Grady to handle this.
None of the 4 stations that are in this package are handicap accessible, and the time frame for the closures does not allow for the installation of elevators at these stations. We have a parallel key station plan effort that's underway, as well as an assessment of what other stations can be made accessible in the future moving forward. But in answer to your question, direct answer to your question, none of these stations are being made accessible as part of that project.
Is there anyone else? We have a motion and a second on the, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was a little slow. There's a board resolution, and I don't know where this comes up, in our packet at page 124. I'm sorry. There's a board resolution in our packet at page 124, which says, whereas in accordance with section 26, is that being considered here? Are we supposed to vote on this? Okay. In our packet at page 124, there's something labeled a board resolution, which says in accordance with section 1265. Maybe this is because I haven't read it. I don't know how this fits, and it refers to certain schedules that I don't see in my packet. So I'm a little at sea. What are we supposed to vote on this?
If it's the one I think you were talking to, it's typically, it's
It is,
typically
yes, it's what they're
deleted.
voting on. Well, excuse me, this is boilerplate, we use this every month. I think that would make it clearer, because they're looking for schedules that are mentioned that aren't there because it's boilerplate. You understand? I mean, it's not edited month to month, that's just what I'm saying.
I don't think we vote on this every month. Well, this
but
isn't
why-
boilerplate that we vote on every month. I don't think so. I don't remember seeing this before.
Yeah.
I think we're
May I-
confused.
Mr. Chairman? I believe the procurement package that comes to the board each month is divided into schedules that accord with the intricacies of the state procurement laws that are applicable to the MTA and to the New York City Transit. And there's a resolution that makes the findings that's contained in the package that relate to the particular types of procurements there are. So Steve can speak to it too, but there are a number of different schedules. For example, if there's an RFP type procurement, the language is in there that makes the board findings relevant to that. If there were to be a sole source procurement, there's a schedule that would relate to that. Steve, do you want to elaborate any further?
Each month, if you go back, there is a resolution that precedes each of the procurements, which calls out certain statutes like 1209 that the procurements comport with. I'm sorry.
Do we have the schedules for these items?
Yeah, we could certainly provide them. They're a prelude to the procurements that follow in the various sections that the awards are made under.
We don't vote on the board resolution, even though it's entitled a board resolution. We don't actually vote on it.
You vote on the procurements.
But we don't have the list of procurements. Do we, on the schedules?
No, you have schedules here that don't exist in our packet. I'm sorry, I'm dense on this one.
The board resolution references schedules, but in some cases, the schedules are not there because there's no procurements.
That's correct.
In that category. But we don't, that board resolution is not edited to take out, am I correct in saying, it's not edited to take out the schedules that are not included that month?
Correct. They just refer to all the schedules, and the ones that are applicable are the ones that are mentioned, actually resident in the actual procurement.
Because there's all these things.
The schedules are the different categories of procurements under each of the, and so if there's procurements that fall under that category, they're listed. If there's not procurements, they're not listed.
Chairman, may I?
Yes, please.
For example, if on page 123 of your board book, there are listed the series of procurement actions, and you'll see reference to Schedule C, for example, which has one of the procurements in it. You'll see reference to Schedule G, you'll see reference to Schedule H, and you'll see reference to Schedule I, and then you'll see indications where there are no procurements in question. Schedule K concerns ratifications.
Well, now I'm very unclear. Are we voting on each individual procurement if we're voting on each individual procurement subject to its legal underpinnings, basis for non-competitiveness or two-thirds vote or whatever, why do we need a resolution if there is existing law that empowers us to do that with respect to each individual vote on each individual procurement?
The legislation provides the basis for doing a certain type of procurement. For example, an RFP, the board makes a finding that that process is appropriate to use for that procurement. That's what the resolution does. It's as covered by the all-agency procurement
But
guidelines.
aren't we doing that by voting as we vote on each individual procurement, as opposed to requiring some sort of omnibus resolution?
I think for time, not time immemorial, but for a long time, and I'd have to go back and trace how long, the efficiency of having a standard resolution and then having each of the procurements put in the right category or box that it relates to under the statute, and the findings being made that are required as being covered by the resolution makes it compliant with law.
But here, the resolution covers schedules A through K, and not all the procurements before us are necessarily in each and every one of those schedules. Is that correct?
Correct. That each procurement is in one particular schedule.
Right, but some of the schedules that are listed in the resolution are not before us today.
In which case, that portion of the resolution would be not relevant.
Then why should we be voting on it?
I think that's a request to edit this thing.
Are we voting on a resolution or on procurements?
The board is advancing procurements, the committee is advancing procurements to the board for vote at the board meeting that fit into various categories under the statute. So when the vote is taken on the procurement package after the motion, it is the recommendation of the committee that the board pass those, and that the findings be made that are set forth in the resolution applicable to those categories of procurements.
Well, is there anything to which this resolution is applicable to in these procurements that we're voting to advance to the full board?
I believe so. Steve, you may be able to help me out as to
What
the
was that again? I'm
particulars
sorry.
here.
Is there anything that we're voting to advance to the board that this resolution is applicable to?
Well, certainly we're comporting with 1209 and the statute there and 1265. And as we move forward here,
But are there non-competitive procurements? I don't think there are. Are there?
I'm doing a double check. There are no non-competitive procurements, I believe.
Which is really what the resolution relates to, right? I think. The resolution is to make non-competitive procurements compliant with law. Is that?
If in fact if we were requesting that you dispense with competitive bidding, then it would.
So for the sake of simplicity for today, could we just remove the resolution from that which we're voting on, Mr. Chairman, without damaging it? Well, I don't. Maybe if.
I do not believe we are voting on a resolution. We are voting on these procurements as a package or individually, whatever you like. On the procurements. We're clear on that, right?
It appears that we are voting on the resolution. I just have a simple question, which is, we've just been given recommendations for a certain number of procurement. If we vote yes for that, do we have a legal requirement to vote for this resolution as well? Because if we don't, why don't we just table it?
At the board meeting, the committee makes a recommendation. At the board meeting, when the procurement package for the transit committee is approved by the board, it will be also approving the resolution that makes the findings that are required under the state procurement statutes that fit that category. For example, for Schedule C, which relates to RFPs, requests for proposals, there's a finding the board authorizes the execution of the contract. For Schedule D, I don't know, are there any contracts here that relate to Schedule D? Perhaps not. But by each category, the findings are made that are required by the statute.
And let me ask you a question, Mr. Henley. Would we have a problem if we set aside the resolution and voted on the procurements?
Not at the committee level, we would not.
Can we do that? There is a motion and a second on the procurements. Those two that were highlighted and the rest that are in our committee book. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The procurements carry. Thank you. Mark Holmes for service changes.
Thank you, and good morning. This month, MTA Bus has one staff summary for committee information. In order to provide a more reliable service on a more direct travel path, while at the same time addressing safety concerns associated with a series of complicated traffic maneuvers, we will revise the travel path of the southbound Q10 local to use 134th Street as opposed to 150th Avenue and the Van Wyck Expressway Service Road. This revision will align both the north and southbound travel paths of the Q10 local while discontinuing two very low-volume bus stops and adding one new bus stop. This recommended revision would result in a small decrease in operating costs of less than $10,000, which is attributed to a slight reduction in travel distance. This concludes the service change section of the agenda.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the service changes? Hearing none, I'll ask Acting President Mulligan to make special reports and presentations.
Moving now to special reports. We've covered the paratransit report, so I bring your attention to the two remaining reports for discussion. First, we will hear from Cynthia Wilson, Assistant Director from MTA Homeless Outreach, who will briefly provide you with an update on continued efforts to address the homeless population in our subway system. Following, I'm sorry, go ahead, Cynthia.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good morning. MTA Homeless Outreach provides data on our program twice per year, October and April. The last update given to the board was in April 2017. The city and MTA jointly fund the subway outreach program run by social services provider Bowery Residence Committee, which is BRC. The city directly manages the program and oversees the hope count and quarterly counts. In 2017, the homeless population in the subway increased by 15% over 2016, and the citywide adult street population increased by 39%, according to the city's 2017 hope count. When the temperature is below freezing, we concentrate on a list of vulnerable clients who we check on and monitor during the colder weather. As winter approaches, we are actively working with the Department of Homeless Services, NYPD, and the social services community to strengthen our outreach efforts to get the homeless the services they need, so we can improve the quality and capacity of our subway service. To this end, New York City Transit has issued a request for interest to further enhance our outreach efforts. To help a homeless person in need, you can always contact me directly. However, for an immediate response, contact NYPD, station employees. You can dial 311 or use the city's 311 app, or BRC's Homeless Helpline, which is 212-533-5151. This concludes the Homeless Outreach Report. Thank you.
Now, Jim Henley, Vice President and General Counsel, will provide a follow-up report on the Transit Recidivism Initiative that was requested by the chair of the committee in September. And also, I just want to note for the record that the MetroCard Special Report and the materials from the 2018 preliminary budgets for New York City Transit, Staten Island Railroad, and MTA Bus were previously distributed. Jim?
Pardon me. Thank you. At the request of the committee chair, I'm giving a report on the Transit's Recidivism Initiative. We've now been doing this for a year, starting to review the data on arrests of individuals who are recidivist arrestees. We have a full year's worth of data now, so I'll update you on that data and then note some of the efforts being undertaken through the initiative, highlighting some notable case results. First, with the statistical overview. The report covers two types of recidivist arrests. There are the index felony crimes and sex offenses. Based upon data from August 2016 through July 2017, you'll see that for that 12-month period, there was a monthly average of a total of approximately 16 recidivist arrests in the subway system, broken down about half and half with the slightly more index felony recidivist arrests. There were 8.3 average index felony arrests for with recidivist histories. There were 7.6 sex offense recidivist arrests with prior history. On the index felony side, you'll see that grand larceny offenses represented 62 of the 99 recidivist index crime arrests. That's approaching 2/3. Robbery accounted for 28 of those incidents, making up the second largest category. Over the course of the reporting year, subway recidivist robbery arrests experienced an uptick. As I'll discuss below, we're asking the DA's offices to put special emphasis on the prosecution of recidivist robbery arrestees. Recidivist arrests for sex offenses remain concentrated in two areas. Forcible touching offenses, as you can see, represented 40 of the 91 incidents, and public lewdness represented 27 of the 91 incidents, for percentages of approximately 44% and 30% respectively. In terms of arrests by county or location, Manhattan continued to account for the lion's share of recidivist arrests at nearly 64%. Kings County had the second largest percentage, just over 20%. The Bronx and Queens accounted for the remainder of those. With that statistical background, let me highlight some of the developments for the initiative since our last update. We are continuing to develop our liaison relationships with the district attorney's offices and their crime strategies units in an effort to focus prosecutorial resources on significant transit recidivist cases. Through the liaisons, we're highlighting new recidivist arrest cases of persons who had significant subway arrest history that we believe warrant those offices' prosecutorial focus. We're also tracking developments in the DA's office's prosecution of these priority cases in order to identify opportunities for transit and its customers' concerns to be heard. We also continue to work with NYPD Transit Bureau to enhance the ability of the DA's offices to identify transit recidivist cases at the time the arrest first comes to the prosecutor's office attention. The Transit Bureau, working in consultation with us, is finalizing an informational tool that will allow DA's offices to flag a transit arrest case at its earliest stages of proceedings as one involving a history of prior subway arrests. The goal here is to provide the DA's offices a system-wide, citywide tool to promote better understanding and identification of these cases so that decisions can be made up front concerning bail and other matters, charging decisions, knowing that there's history with that arrestee. I would like to take a minute or two to discuss a few notable outcomes, in particular transit system recidivist prosecutions. While many cases we have highlighted as priority prosecutions have yet to come to resolution, enough time has passed now since we began the project and since the arrests for there to be some notable outcomes. With respect to sex offenses, the case of Ahmad Kazmoin is worthy of note. This individual was arrested for persistent sex abuse in August 2016. His was one of the first cases tracked by the initiative, as he was identified in the initial August Transit Bureau report to us as an arrestee with a lengthy history of prior sex offense arrests. Based upon that history, we contacted the Manhattan DA's office liaison, urging vigorous prosecution in that case. Kazmoin was charged with both persistent sex abuse and a failure to register as a sex offender. And the development I can report is that Kazmoin has now pleaded guilty, receiving a determinate prison sentence of 3 years, which will be followed by a period of 10 years of post-release supervision. In addition, he had a concurrent sentence imposed of 1.5 to 4 years. In the next several months, that was one of our earliest cases that we followed. In the next several months, there are a number of transit sex offense recidivist prosecutions that are coming up for trial and that we will be tracking. We are communicating with the DA's offices regarding these matters to urge appropriate terms of confinement that reflect the injury these offenses do to our subway customers and the subway environment. To highlight just one such case that's coming up, Jeffrey Taylor was arrested in December 2016, charged with persistent sex abuse. The NYPD information provided us showed that this individual was a classified level 3 sex offender, has prior arrests in the transit system for public lewdness, forcible touch, and persistent sex abuse. We understand the DA is pursuing a significant term of imprisonment, which could be followed by a lengthy period of supervised release. We will continue to keep in touch with the DA's offices so they keep us apprised of developments and so that we can look for opportunities to voice transit's and its ridership's concerns concerning these kinds of offenses. Our dealings with the DA's offices have not been limited to sex offense prosecutions. I want to just take a moment to touch on recidivist robbery arrests. I noted that our recidivist data for the first 12 months has showed an uptick in recidivist arrests for robbery. Although the total numbers are relatively small, as you saw, there have been consecutive quarter-to-quarter increases in arrests of recidivists for robbery offenses in the subway during the first year of data collection. We've highlighted, therefore, for each of the DA's offices our concern and have identified to these offices significant arrests that we believe warrant special attention by the prosecutors in the area of robbery. We're tracking these as priority matters. I do want to note the recent success of the King's DA's office in concluding the robbery prosecution of transit recidivist Brunash Harvins, arrested in April of this year with a prior history of arrests for subway robberies. We understand Mr. Harvins has now been sentenced to 8 years in prison plus 5 years post-release supervision. In these and other cases, we'll continue our efforts to keep focus on important recidivist cases and advocate for outcomes reflective of the gravity of these matters to New York City Transit. In our limited remaining time, I want briefly to mention our ongoing effort in the initiative to collect sentencing data for the first full year of recidivist arrests, the better to undertake informed discussions with the administrative judges of the criminal term Supreme Courts as well as criminal misdemeanor courts concerning outcomes in transit recidivism cases. We're working with the DA's offices on that effort, which is ongoing. Many cases remain unresolved, given the relatively brief life of this project and the time it takes many cases to reach trial and sentencing. While we continue, therefore, to pursue more complete sentencing outcome data, we have already reached out to the administrative judges of criminal term in the 1st and 2nd judicial districts to set up meetings to introduce them to the Transit Recidivist Initiative in our effort to focus appropriate criminal justice resources on these cases. We also intend to discuss with them how our sentencing laws can be applied best to effectively address the problem of repeat offenders in the transit system. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention I'd be remiss if I couldn't advance this slide. Can you advance that slide for me? It's the next slide. Pardon me. Finally, I wanted to focus attention on the subject of employee assaults. Consistent with the high importance that transit places on employee safety, the New York City Department of Security investigates assaults made on transit employees and then closely monitors the prosecution of individuals who are apprehended for such offenses. Of note, in terms of such prosecutions, was the recent sentencing this August of defendant Everett Robinson. This individual had set fire to a toll booth occupied by a transit station agent, pouring flammable liquid into the station booth aperture and igniting it in an attempted robbery. Charged with arson and attempted robbery, the defendant pleaded guilty in August and is now sentenced to 7 years in prison with an additional 5 years of post-release supervision and with an earliest release date of August 15, 2022. We are most grateful for the efforts of NYPD and the Brooklyn DA's office in vigorously investigating and prosecuting this case and the close monitoring of this very serious employee assault by New York City Transit Department of Security. In all these efforts, we work closely with NYPD Transit Bureau and appreciate their ongoing help. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Henley. Are there any questions on his presentation?
Just one. First of all, thank you very much for that report and for the recidivist initiative, which I think is great. I assume as we get more deeply into this in terms of time, you will add to the report dispositions as a category beyond anecdotally. Is that?
Yes, we will be doing that. As I indicated, many of these cases have not yet reached resolution. there certainly are some that have, but for the data to be meaningful, we need to assemble sufficiently a quantity of these. There are even cases from last fall, a year ago, that are still outstanding.
Thank you.
Dr. Metzger.
I'm pleased to see the progress you've made, but I agree that we should have a more routine report on this so we can see the efficacy of the project. I'd also like to point out that a tireless advocate for this program has been Commissioner Mordler. And since this material was not in our book, would you reach out to him, please?
I certainly will. We have been presenting a quarterly statistical update in the book, and in accordance with the chairman's wishes, we'll be presenting quarterly to the committee.
Mr. Henley, now I'd like to ask Mr. Lieber to present the MTA-CC portion of this. First an action item and then his project report.
Good afternoon. MTA-CC is requesting board approval to transfer $150 million in excess savings to the Second Avenue Subway project in order to fund negotiated additional work orders, contractor claims, impact costs, and support costs, all of which were incurred in the final stages of the project's completion. These savings, as I said, are being drawn from available funds from past administrative activities, unused real estate funding that was part of the Second Avenue Subway project, and reserve in current administrative program budgets. I request your approval, and of course, I'm available to answer any questions.
May I please have a motion? Second. Are there any questions or comments? Mr. Wiseman.
Question. This $150 million, does this cover the items that were outstanding post January 1? Are they covered? Do they cover items pre-January 1st, or does this cover all the outstanding issues that you reported on at the last board meeting?
Its purpose is certainly to cover everything future going and to try to close the books, in effect. We do have additional work orders, which is the euphemism for change orders, still being negotiated, but this is an attempt to estimate the full amount of what will be necessary to close out all of those change orders, outstanding claims, and everything that may be needed to finalize and fully complete the project. As for what it includes from before January 1, it definitely includes some of that as well. Work that had to be done, but has only been negotiated out in the last period since service opened.
But just to conclude it, the estimate is that this $150 million will cover all outstanding capital work relating to the implementation of the Second Avenue Subway in these 4 stations.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Greenberg.
Yeah, related to this is the procurement which was approved just now. I don't have the question I have is it says percent of modifications and 34.1%. Is that the additional amount that had to be paid to get Second Avenue Subway done over the original? Well, I know how. I use the word original loosely because it is Second Avenue Subway, but what I'm really asking is how much more money did we spend to get Second Avenue done on time in the past year? Does anybody have a number?
Well, I don't know if that's really an available number. What this all reflects is, bringing a project to completion that had, like many of our major projects, had different kinds of challenges at different moments. The purpose here is to wrap them all up. And it puts us at the end at 3% over the budget amount, which incidentally is lower than the federal government's so-called full funding grant agreement budget, but it So in fairness, Mr. Greenberg, it's impossible to say, well, that was because we were all pushing to get it done on time versus something that would have been a claim or a dispute or a change order otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Lieber. Anyone else? If there is none, there's a motion. All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? The motion passes. Please proceed, Mr. Lieber, with the rest of your report.
I know time is short, Mr. Chairman. I just want to report to the committee on one project which was the source of some discussion at the last meeting, which is the Cortlandt Street project, where there has been, I think, significant positive progress since the committee met last month. We began in the wake of your comments and actions. We had very productive conversations with Judlow, and at this point, while we do not have a final agreement vis-a-vis the schedule going forward, we do have, as I said, we're significantly more optimistic about completing it in the revenue service date of October 2018. Judlow is committed to providing the resources necessary, and we've already seen that in the work at the station and the staffing. They've developed intermediate milestones, and they've secured important commitments from subcontractors. And as I said, they provided us with a new baseline schedule, which we are working with them on and with some scheduling experts to validate and see if we can put this to bed once and for all about what schedule they are going to work towards. I'm not going to provide a whole lot more detail, but I would say that to the extent that last month I was reporting to you that they were not performing tasks in keeping with their own schedule, I think they are much, much closer, although maybe not 100% in terms of the productivity of the work on the job, and there have been some very significant activities that were, in my view, delayed, which have been now performed, and we've been breaking through. So that is the status. I think by next month I will be able to give you a meaningful, more final report on whether the right schedule is agreed to and the right schedule is achievable.
That's certainly worth looking forward to. Thank you. Mr. Albert.
Mr. Lieber, as I recall, the independent engineer last month said in order to be finished on time, they would have to do a 100% larger amount of work than they were doing, which is virtually doubling. Do you think you have a commitment close to that?
I think, again, over the concept, and again, it's not finalized, the concept is that they would accomplish that scale of work, that increase in productivity. To date, while I wouldn't say that they have doubled their productivity, they are in the, in excess of 60% increase in productivity versus where they were in the prior month. That's my rough estimate of the uptick that we've seen.
I also think it's fair
related
to
to the
say
Enhanced Station Initiative?
It's fair to say, Mr. Albert, that this contractor will no longer be burdened by NES, whatever it is, contract that would require them to build 4 more stations. I just concentrate on this one. Anyone else? We're at the finish line. May I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.